Welcome to Layer the Alchemist, where we discuss all things heavy metal and hard rock. On today's episode, let's discuss the debut album from Motley Crue, Too Fast for Love. This album was originally released in 1981, November of 1981, on Motley Crue's own label, Leather Records. They would go on the following year to be signed to Elektra Records. Elektra would re-release this album. They would remix it with the help of Roy Thomas Baker, who was famous for working with the early Queen albums. They would touch up a few spots here and there, and the track listing would be, the order of the songs would be a little different, and there was a song on the original Motley, the Leather Records version, that Stick to Your Guns, that did not make it to the Elektra version until later with CDs when it showed up as a bonus track. This is a really interesting album, and an album that I really like. I've mentioned on this channel before that I'm a big fan of what I call the first wave of hair metal. Now, first so the first wave of LA metal, hair metal for me is like early Rat, early Motley, early Dokken. The name hair metal, this is something that every time I talk about one of these bands, I never quite know how to describe them, and people go back and forth in the comments and all over the internet about this. Hair metal, and I agree with this, is sort of has a kind of a put down, derogatory feel to it. It wasn't an expression that people used at that time. It sort of came later as this type of music was starting to go away. So that's not, it's not a term that a lot of people like. I like to use the LA metal scene because a lot of these bands are from that scene, but then there's a lot of other bands that were in this style that weren't from LA, like Twisted Sister, for instance, or even bands just from like the San Francisco area, like Tesla or something. And often you'll see sort of a compromise seems to be glam metal. Now, for some people, they don't even like to call a lot of this, the Rat and Dokken stuff, even metal, because if you're thinking metal in the traditional sense of Iron Maiden and Judas Priest, I guess a new wave of British heavy metal, it doesn't really fit that mold, but there's definitely metal elements to it. There's definitely more of a radio rock sort of melodic element to it. So if you want to say melodic hard rock, you'll often see people say glam metal. Now, I have a problem with the glam metal tag because for me, there were glam metal bands and they were more influenced by the 70s glam hard rock acts. And this album for me is a glam hard rock, glam heavy metal album. It's really the only album like this that Motley Crue did, because Shout at the Devil, the next album, would be more of a metal album, and then they would move more into like sort of the radio hard rock realm. But this album for me is what I think of as glam metal. I would also put in like maybe Hanoi Rocks or Pretty Boy Floyd as bands that were also doing this kind of thing. But this album really has a feel and an element to me. It's a very 70s sounding record to me. Reminds me a lot of the Sweet Desolation Boulevard, which is an album I love. I'm going to eventually do a video on that album because I do love it. But I hear all elements of like T-Rex, the Sweet, maybe Mott the Hoople, the glammier side of like David Bowie, maybe the New York Dolls. And you hear it in the melody lines. You hear it in the like the guitar tone for me. I love Mick Mars's tone on this record. It's got a really nice sweet distortion sound to it. The melody lines here from Vince Neil are very melodic, almost bubblegummy at times. Nikki Sixx's songwriting is clearly Nikki Sixx, who I think is a great songwriter. Is clearly he has a foot in the 70s at this point. You're not hearing any new wave of British heavy metal influence on this from me. I don't hear that at all. I hear strictly like 70s glam, 70s hard rock type of influence coming through on this. And it's all right. So who else tonight? Tommy Lee. Tommy Lee's an absolutely amazing, great, fantastic hard rock drummer. And there's a really cool vibe to this record for me. It's produced by the band. Again, Roy Thomas Baker came in and remixed it, touched it up a little bit when it was re-released on Elektra Records. I've never actually heard the Leather Records version. I guess I should seek it out to see how much different it sounds. But to me, it has a really stripped down, really simple production, but it really works for me. It's a little loose, it's a little sloppy and messy around the corners and in the transitions, but it has a real live feel to it. Like they just kind of, like they were playing these songs live on the Sunset Strip, and they just kind of came in and recorded this, you know, recorded their live show basically. And I love it. I think it has a certain feel to it. I'm a big fan of 70s hard rock and glam stuff, so this really comes out to me when I listen to this record. And it's full of a lot of really, really good songs. Some of my favorite Motley Crue songs. Starts with LiveWire, probably the most popular song from this, real fast, hard driving song. Mick Mars, I've mentioned it already. His guitar sounds great. He's got a lot of cool fills, and I love his lead tone. The drums in it, I love the cowbell in it. You know, Tommy Lee's just his drumming. He's just bashing out with those like stops and starts where there's drum fills and a little cymbal choke thing is just great. Public Enemy #1 is pretty cool. Again, this has a real 70s glammy feel to it for me. Most of the songs are written by, the music is Nikki Sixx. Most of the lyrics are Nikki Sixx. There's a couple here where Vince Neil gets a writing credit. And interestingly, on Public Enemy #1, Lizzie Gray gets a writing credit. Now, Lizzie Gray was in the band London. London was this popular on the Sunset Strip band that never really broke out of the Sunset Strip, and they were sort of famous for like a lot of musicians playing in the band and then going on to bigger and better things. And Nikki Sixx spent some time in London, so I guess that's where that writing credit comes from. Take Me to the Top is really cool. I love the chorus in that. I love sort of the tempo changes in it, you know, the way it just take me to the top, you know, the way it goes into that chorus is really cool. Merry Go Round, here's a good example of that sort of like bubblegummy melody style thing that to me is very, very glammy, that they were going for on this record. And that plucked guitar line is very sort of major key, sweet saccharine sounding in a lot of ways, but it's cool because it has this sort of rolling feel to it, like a merry-go-round, I guess. Piece of Your Action is one that I really love. I love sort of chugging riff in that. Give me a piece of your action. It just locks in really tight and grooves really hard, really great. Starry Eyes is neat. Stick to Your Guns is cool. Actually, I'm reading off of the Elektra Records version here, or the Leather Records version. The order on the Elektra one is a little different. Come On and Dance is one that I really like. I love the chorus in it. I just think it's super catchy. The verse has got this sort of start-stop feel to it. The title track is awesome. Too Fast for Love. I think the chorus in it is great. Super, super melodic and catchy. You know, Nikki Sixx, I said this earlier, he's just a really great songwriter, and I think the reason why Motley Crue was able to stand above a lot of their other peers on the Sunset Strip was, one, they came out really early. I often forget how early Motley Crue was in on this. I mean, they released this on their own in '81, and Elektra picked them up in '82. So they were very early in on the whole, like, LA metal scene thing. They were, like, right there. And Nikki Sixx, his sort of vision for the band, even though the band changed sort of their image and sound a little bit, there was still a real consistency, and I think that was because Nikki Sixx was the primary songwriter through all their music. And then On With the Show. On With the Show is interesting. It really, really makes me think of Quiet Riot, the Randy Rhoads era of Quiet Riot. If for those that don't know, Randy Rhoads went and played with Ozzy on the Blizzard of Oz and Tire of Madman album, started off in Quiet Riot. This is before Quiet Riot released Metal Health. And Quiet Riot was a big band on the Sunset Strip, most famously for playing at a club called the Starwood, where they were like a really big hit there. And Motley Crue used to play the Starwood, and Nikki Sixx was there with London. And this song, On With the Show, really sounds like a Quiet Riot, Randy Rhoads era song, and I wonder if there was some influence there. Supposedly Nikki even auditioned for the Randy Rhoads era of Quiet Riot at one point, and Rudy Sarzo landed up getting that gig. But if you ever have a chance, go on YouTube and look for Randy Rhoads Quiet Riot live, and you'll hear that they were sort of in this similar vein, this sort of glammy, Mott the Hoople, 70s kind of vibe. They had a very kind of similar vibe to this first Motley Crue album. I'd say that the songwriting is much stronger on this than it was with Quiet Riot, but all right, so there you go. That was the Leather Records version of it. It's not too, you know, they mix up the order a little bit on the Elektra one. Come On and Dance is the second track on the Elektra one. Let's see here. Piece of Your Actions starts side 2. But it's a really cool album. I really only like the first two Motley Crue albums. For Shout at the Devil, they will go in more of a metal direction. But here I just dig this 70s vibe to him, the real melodic feel of it. Vince Neil's really high voice and everything, the way he sings, I just think is great. So, all right, let me know in the comments down below. What do you guys think of Motley Crue's Too Fast for Love? Do you hear the 70s influences in it the way I do? Let me know what you think in the comments down below. And until we see you again, make sure you stay heavy, stay metal.